Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Speaking of greatest potential, growth is really a process in which we develop and mature physically, emotionally, and mentally. But we can also grow in our spiritual self, combining all aspects of our mind, body, and soul. You see, when we heal and examine our lives from every angle, we open the door to discovering our true identity, purpose, and abilities. In this week's episode, we chat with Transformational Shaman Kelle Sparta. She walks us through her journey of healing her childhood, leaving the life she had created but didn't recognize as her own, taking a year-long walkabout of self-discovery, creating a healing strategy and system that can serve each of us, and then she ultimately takes us through the steps to finding our true self while we lean into the shadows of our lives and find the greatest path for growth. Be prepared to have significant eye-opening moments as Kelle hands over the spiritual curriculum to healing and true life expansion. It's a conversation you simply do not want to miss. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. I'm so excited to have you with me today. We're going to talk about something that I know our audience really has great intention on learning, and that is healing. So tell us a little bit about who you are, your personal story, and let's dive into what it means to heal.
Yeah, so my name's Kelle Sparta. I am a transformational shaman. I go by the spirit doctor because, it just sort of applies. I help people to evolve and heal their spirits. And so in terms of my story, my parents divorced when I was 5. My father was a rageaholic and my mother was an alcoholic. And so when my parents divorced, my dad mostly disappeared out of my life. I heard from him maybe 3 times a year and, saw him for 2 weeks in the summer if we happened to be within driving distance of him, which we weren't often because my mother was military. So on top of it, we were also moving every year or two. And so I had no consistency in my life other than my mother, the alcoholic, who was emotionally unavailable, right? And so, we were best friends, but because my mother was emotionally 5 years old my whole life. And so there's that. I was asked to take care of her emotionally to the point where, I actually ran her life a lot to the point where I was in college and she actually was moving to a new location. And she sent me a layout of her new home with 2-scale model of all the furniture and asked me to arrange the furniture for her so that when the movers came, they would put them in the right places. I mean, to that level, right? I wasn't even living at home anymore and I was still running her life. So I, to say that I had a little bit of healing to do of my own accord was, not surprising. But luckily, my mother was aware that she had challenges and needed healing. And so my entire childhood was spent listening to self-help books and personal growth things. And she had also been psychic. And so she had shut it down when she was a kid because she was afraid of it. She was determined that would not happen for me. And so we also studied psychic abilities and skills and self-hypnosis and you name it, we studied it. And so I was raised in this whole process. And so, I've been doing this work for as long as I can remember. It's just part of my beingness, right? And so my personal journey started very early. And then I went to college and I got married. And so I took a 7-year hiatus from my spiritual work. And then when I recognized that this was my passion, this work is my passion, right? I went to get certified for a program to teach it. While I was there, he introduced me to the concept of Reiki. And in that weekend, I also got clarity that I needed to leave my husband. So if you looked at my life at that time, it was perfect from the outside. I mean, I had the trophy husband. He was gorgeous. He worked out every day, right? I had the big house on the cul-de-sac lot. I had the dog and the 2 cars and the successful business with a full-time assistant. And I was a pillar of my community. I was volunteering full-time for Habitat for Humanity as their president. And basically, I hated my life.
Right.
And I had been in a cold war with my husband for years, almost the entire time we were married. I had been burned out on my job for years, almost the whole time. The dog never liked me.
Not the dog.
I didn't like the big house that we had bought. I was like, yeah, it's a good investment. We'll buy it. It's fine. He and I could not agree on anything. We couldn't agree on furniture. So we bought furniture neither one of us liked. We couldn't agree on a house. So we bought the house that would be the good investment. Everything in my life was not what I wanted. Right. And, this was the antithesis of the life I had pictured for myself, which if you've ever seen the movie Auntie Mame, where she is bright and sunshiny and vibrant, and her life is filled with creative people and musicians and free thinkers and, philosophers. And that was the life I wanted for myself. And I was living a suburban housewife life. I was selling real estate. It was just like, I was like, yeah. And so I literally leveled my life and I quit everything. I divorced my husband. I sold the house. I made him take the dog. I sold my business. I quit the nonprofit and I moved out of state to live with a bunch of people I had met while working the Renaissance Fair. Okay. I rented a room in a 6-bedroom house. And so that started a 4-year journey of healing, hardcore healing for me. I had gotten my Reiki certification. I had gotten my Shiatsu certification. I had done a lot of research around Chinese medicine and healing properties and healing energies. And I started a retail store. And then 4 years later, the house itself really just sort of dissipated and everyone flew to the different areas. I mean, they all moved across country. And so when I left the house, I tried to find a place to live and couldn't. I was like, okay, I'm leaving on this day. And my landlord, the guy who owned the place, who was one of my friends, was being a pain because he didn't like being abandoned. And so when I told him when I was getting out, he's like, yes, you're out. And I was like, I can't find a place to be. He's like, doesn't matter, you're out. Wow. And so I had been running a teaching circle for a while. And so I was literally for the next 6 months, I would live in a different person's house each day of the week. And so that went on for 6 months because I could not find a place to live. I kept applying and applying and applying and applying, and nothing would say yes. Eventually, I recognized that the universe just was not going to let me have a home. And so I scheduled my giveaway. I scheduled time for everybody to come to my storage unit. And I was like, okay, come and take whatever you want. But the deal is, if you come and take stuff, you have to help me get rid of whatever's left in the unit when we're done. So that you have to help me cart it off to a donation center. And so that's what we did. And shortly after I scheduled it, I went to somebody's house and I was reading their bathroom reading. And I opened the book, Lame Deer Seeker of Visions, and to a random page, and it said, the apprentice shaman will give away everything he owns. And I went,
that gives me chills, actually. I have chills from head to toe. Wow. Okay.
I was like, oh my God. Right. So I did the giveaway, and the only thing I was clear on was that I was meant to go to this festival called Starwood, and which doesn't exist anymore. But I went to this festival and I was getting ready to go, and I was like, okay, I need to get a tattoo. I'd had a dream of my back covered in tattoos that were all my totems. And I was, in the dream, I was like 85 years old and all of these tattoos were there. And I was clear in the dream that those tattoos showed up over time, right? That they were done over time. And so I was like, I felt like the first one had to happen at the festival. And I knew that there was a ritual tattooist at the festival who was highly recommended by a bunch of people I knew. And so I thought, okay, I'll get the tattoo done by him. And I reached out on the discussion group and said, hey, does anyone know how to get hold of Abraham? And somebody saw that post, pulled it and emailed it directly to Abraham, who got it at midnight the night before he was leaving for the festival and would have no more access to the internet because, of course, this was 2000 when there was no smartphones or anything.
Right.
And he responded to me at midnight and said, if you get this email before I sign off and you respond, then I will give you my last slot for a tattoo. And I happened to be online at the time that happened and said, yes, please. And he asked me for my intentions and so on. And we covered it. And he's like, okay, great. Here's your appointment time. I'll see you on this day at this time. And I'm like, okay, great. So flash forward to the event. I am at the event. This event is a camping event, right? And so I was looking for a campsite, and being a avid camper at the time, I knew what good sites were and what not good sites were. So I was trying to both find a good site and be somewhere close to something that I couldn't identify what I wanted to be close to. So I was circling and circling and circling and circling, trying to find a way to be in this one area. And I just couldn't find a decent campsite in that area. And so I ended up camping somewhere else. But what happened was I knew when I left for this event that I was not coming back anytime soon. And so I had actually quit my job, closed up my life and the whole 9 yards, right? And so I got to this event and I knew I wasn't going back. And so I figured, whatever it is will show up here. Well, as it turns out, through multiple different situations, I met all these people who were associated with the person who happened to have the tent that was in the center of the area I had been circling, trying to find a place to find my campsite, right? And so I was talking to one of his friends, and she introduced me to him, and he walked straight up to me and kissed me on the lips. And I was just like, whoa, shocked. And yet it was okay. And I couldn't figure out why. And he looked at me and he's like, I have no idea why I just did that. I'm like, neither do I, but it's okay. and it was like, okay. And as it turns out, he was the person that I followed home. I caravanned with him back to their space in Bloomington, Indiana, thinking, okay, I'm moving there, right? No, 5 o'clock in the morning, we pull in and I see the sign for Bloomington, Indiana, and I go, oh, I'm not home. After years of being military, I know when home exists, right? And I'm like, oh, this isn't home. Crap, I'm on walkabout. And I'd only learned about the term walkabout 6 months before. And so for those of you who've never heard of it, walkabout means to walk out into the world until you find yourself. It is an Aboriginal term from Australia, and most people associate it with going out into the desert, but that's because the Aborigines live in the desert and that's their home. But I live in the US and I drive a car. And so my walkabout was more of a drive about, but I had given away everything I owned except my car, my camping gear, my clothes, and like a couple of things, like everything that fit in my car. I didn't own anything that didn't fit in my car anymore. And so I was on walkabout for another 6 months. Wow. So technically, I'd really been on walkabout the whole time, right? I just didn't recognize it until then. And so that walkabout would take me almost a full year. It took me 14,000 miles in a whole year. And I learned so much about myself. I learned where I began and where I ended and other people began, because as an empath, I had no idea what that was. I learned that people actually did value me because they were happy to see me if I circled back around. They were like, wee, I'm so happy to see you, right? And I learned that people actually cared about my journey, and because I was keeping a live journal. That's how long ago this was. I was keeping a live journal. I would write down notes in my notebook, and then I would find an internet cafe, enter everything into my live journal so that people could follow the journey. So, there were countless things that I learned, but on top of it, I had 2 readings on the journey that said it would be more than 10 years before I would truly understand the import of the journey. And so one of the things that happened while I was on that journey was everybody was asking me the same questions. Every place I stopped, they'd all ask me the same questions over and over again. And after about the 10th time, I was just like, I'm tired of talking about this. And so at one of my stops, I had some time and I spent 3 days and I wrote 45 pages of everything I had learned about personal growth and spirituality that I knew to be true up until that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually formed the foundation for a book that I would actually put together over time that would take me 25 years to write.
Wow.
And basically, every time I did something that worked, I would add it to the book, and I would add it to the book. And I tried over the years giving away the book to friends and saying, okay, do this, whatever. And then I'd call back 3 months, 2 years later and say, hey, did you ever finish the book? And they're like, no, I'm still actively thinking about chapter X, and it'd be a different chapter for everyone. And I'd be like, well, if you wandered off, that's no big deal. Just let me know. And they're like, no, still actively thinking about chapter X. I'm like, okay, so you're stuck. And they're like, I am. I'm like, yes,
Right.
You're stuck. And so what happened was I didn't realize that they were getting stuck all the time. And so I realized I couldn't put it out as a book. And so that's what I actually turned it into a program. And that became the programs that I run today.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 years later, I now understand the purpose of the walkabout, right? It was all of those pieces plus the building of the book and the programs and the whole 9 yards, right? Which, they are the express train to healing is what it is. And so, when you asked me about the healing processes, that's where that came from.
I think that it's amazingly brave, right? To know this is great. This life is what everybody wants, and yet it is totally not aligning with what I need and desire. And so stepping out and choosing you is amazing. I want to step back for just a moment before we start talking about the healing process and all of those, great creative things that you are able to pull forth in personal development and spirituality. And let's get a little deeper for just a moment, because hearing the word shaman for a lot of people brings forth questions of what does that really mean? What is a shaman? What do you do? We know that it has such a beautiful place in healing. So can you tell us what a shaman is, what you do, and how you assist people in their journey?
The first thing I'm going to say is that if you ask 100 shamans what a shaman is, they're going to give you 100 different answers. Okay, because what a shaman is entirely based on their background, tradition, and their personal gifts. And so when you take those two things and you put them together, there's, variety. I want to be clear that I am a transformational shaman, which is very different than a traditional shaman. I don't do fire walks. I don't do sweat lodges. I don't do ayahuasca journeys. I don't do any of that. What I do is I work with people on identity issues. I work with them on up-leveling their identities. I work with them on stripping away their limiting beliefs and their limiting definitions, self-definitions, and freeing them up to be the person that they were meant to be on the planet, right?
Yes, beautiful.
And that's a very different animal than many other shamans. Now, I also do healing work because I am a healer. Most of the people I work with are also empaths. They feel strongly what other people feel. And so when we talk about shamanism, from my perspective, what I'm looking at is the healing process, the personal healing process, the process of evolving yourself. And I do mean evolving yourself. You can't look at a shaman and say, do me. It's not how that works, right? I mean, we can do healing work on you, but your healing work will only stick if you do the work associated with it, right?
Like anything,
this is important, right? If you go to a Reiki healer or any healer, really, any energy healer, and they do energy healing work on, even physical healing work on you, actually, because physical dis-ease is a function of your belief structures and your mindset and your energy processes. You have to do your part of the work in order for it to stick. Otherwise, you're going to be going back every week for a tune-up.
Right.
And be like, okay, it's all messed up again. It's like, yes, because your mental processes are all messed up. That's why your mental processes are stuck in this energetic that you keep calling back to you and that I have to keep clearing. Right. So if you want it to stick, you have to do your side of the work, right? Yes. So shamanism, the type of shamanism that I do is inherently based in personal empowerment. So you have to be responsible for your own self. You have to be responsible for your own outcomes. You have to be responsible to do your own work. And with great responsibility comes great power.
Exactly.
Because when you take responsibility for something, you now have the power to change it.
Yes.
And so that is the work that I do in the world. I do it through a variety of measures. I do it through a coaching process. I do it through energetic work. I do it through teaching energetic work. It's something known as the shaman effect in psychology. And it is basically the belief structure. In psychology, they put it as the belief structure in the person. And it's kind of like a placebo effect is how they look at it. I want to be clear, to a certain extent, it is somewhat similar because a lot, and this is one of the things that I talk to when I'm training other shamans, because I do train shamans, transformational shamans, is that the less experience someone has with something energetic, the more of the trappings of ritual have to put into the process to allow them to suspend their disbelief enough to allow them to receive it. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's not a placebo effect, because if you look at the placebo effect as I am transferring my belief that this will work to you, that's what a placebo effect effectively is, right? And that says that the power of the mind can heal ourselves, right? That's what we can do with it. And so in some respects, that's what it is. In other respects, it is actually, we're doing energetic work on you. You will either receive it or not. Based on your willingness to be open to it, or at least to suspend your disbelief in it, right? This is what we tell people in the very beginning stages. You don't have to believe it. You just have to suspend your disbelief so that you don't resist it. That's how the process works. And so, because that's where the most deeply held beliefs are often stored, right? Is at that foundational pre-verbal symbolic level, right? Our personal belief structures, right? And so when we can work within those constructs, we have we have the ability to be more impactful. Right?
Yeah. Well, we know everything is energy, right? Emotions, thoughts, everything that we experience is energy. Yes. And what we do with it is, it's either going to turn in, as you said, dis-ease or does-ease, or the way to get to the next place, either one. Yeah,
exactly.
So how do you then take your journey, your experience, all of these beautiful aspects of healing mind, body, soul that you just talked about, and teach healing?
So there are 3 stages to healing, and then there are stages of growth beyond that. But there are 3 stages to primary healing. And stage number 1 is finding emotional safety. And the reason that stage is important is because when you feel emotionally unsafe, you spend your entire time basically in your head going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. What's going to run? What's going to happen next? What's going to come flying at my face next? What's the next shoe to drop? Somebody said I need to talk to you. They must be angry at me. Why are they angry at me? I have to look at everything in my head that says that people are, everything that we ever interacted with. What did I do wrong? Right. There's all of that.
Yes.
Right. Or if you're mad at somebody, you're going to have 50 conversations in your head with them, yelling at them, but never say anything out loud. All of that stuff. Right. When your brain is filled with all of that angst and anxiety and upset and fear, you have no bandwidth left for growth.
Right.
Growth requires that you leave your comfort zone, and your comfort zone is so uncomfortable that when you're asked to leave it, you're like, I got no room for more discomfort. I am full on discomfort. Thank you very much. I am over full on discomfort. So you can just take your growth and go. And that's where we are. And so that's why you have to do that first step. You have to bring those stress levels down to at least half in order to be able to begin to do the rest of the work. And so that's stage 1. And that stage is about addressing fear and anxiety and worry and dread and self-doubt and inner and outer judgments. It's also about building a foundation of self-support and courage. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because without those 2, you can't do the growth either. And so stage 2 is about solidifying your sense of self, your identity, your personal power base, your energetic container that holds your will. If you grew up in a challenged childhood environment where you felt unsafe on a regular basis, or you lived with a partner who was a narcissist and a gaslighter and who broke down your sense of self, or you experienced any experience in life that broke down your sense of self, then you will have this problem of not having a solid sense of self. Now, if you want a quick test for whether or not that's true for you, here's the quick test. If you have to make a big decision in your life for yourself, not for somebody else, not for work, whatever, but for yourself. If you have to build up energy, 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 and then immediately pull the trigger on the decision or else all the energy drains back out, then you do not have a solid sense of self.
That's a great way to really think about, do I have that sense of self? That's something so many women struggle with in their lives, is really knowing personal identity. They really think, I am all of these things that have occurred in my life. I am the sum of all of my experiences. And that is the baseline to which they show up to one of us and say, well, here's who I am. And we say, no. Who are you without all of that? Who are you below the titles and all of these things without the events? Can you go deeper into that, just a little bit more into the identity?
Yeah. So when you have this unclear sense of identity, you will often be a chameleon. You're different with different people. You say what you think they want to hear rather than what's true for you. Right. You will make space for everyone else and not take up any space at all for yourself, or minimal if necessary, and you're really uncomfortable with it. You sacrifice yourself on the altar of everyone else's happiness. You are bottom of your own priority list, right? And so all of these things are indicators. So this work is about learning how to claim your space, how to set your boundaries and reinforce them, because people will walk over them because you've trained them that you don't have any, to own your power, how to drain that well of rage that has been living inside of you because you have been bottom of your own priority list and you are pissed as hell about it.
Right.
And how to open up your heart, how to de-armor your heart, and how to actually feel your emotions again instead of managing your emotions with your head by thinking about them and rationalizing them and trying to explain to yourself why you should feel differently, all of that. Right. And then learning to internalize your sense of value so that you can not have to seek outside validation, but instead know that you have value, which this particular one is particularly bad because it creates under-earning. And it creates codependency. If you're a business owner, you'll be codependent with your clients. You'll be like, oh, I have to take care of you,
right.
Because half of what you're looking for is validation. So you make half as much money because the other half of your money you're asking for is validation. That's the other half of your payment. And so you learn how to internalize that sense of value. You don't have those problems anymore. And then ultimately you will learn to love yourself. Though if you do all of those stages, you will automatically step into loving yourself. Now, when I say loving myself, because I know before I started this process, I would hear, oh, you just have to love yourself. And I'd be like, well, I have really high self-esteem. I love myself. It's awesome. And no, I did not love myself. Right. I was bottom of my own priority list. I took care of my needs last. I did not treat myself as a beloved in my own life. I treated myself as the bottom of the barrel in my own life. That was not self-love. Self-love means that you believe that you are lovable and that you have value when you are contributing nothing.
Oh, I love that definition. Contributing nothing. Beautiful. I think just pause in that for just a moment. Beautiful. Absolutely. We do have to be on our own list. That actually was a question that was asked to me 10 years ago, that somebody said, let me ask you, if I asked you who is on your love list, can you pause and create the list? I'm like, sure. Let it run through my head. Then she said, okay, before you say anything, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, okay, great. Are you on that list? Damn, no. I'm not. Right. It never even occurred to me to put myself on that list. And so maybe that's the question you have to ask yourself, pause in that. If I'm contributing nothing, do I still value and love who I am? And am I on that list? Beautiful, Kelly. Thank you for that definition. I think that's probably one of the most transformative definitions I've heard.
Thanks. Yeah. This is the key to solidifying your sense of self, your personal identity, your personal power. right? You can't hold your power until you know who you are, right? I walked into a festival in 2000 and met one of the elders while I was there. And she was a friend of mine. And she introduced her to me. And I was like, hi. And she's like, hi, who are you? And I said, I'm Kelle Sparta. And she said, no, but who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And I went, yeah. Because I had no answer.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. And she's like, yeah, that's evident. And I'm like, Ma, not only do I not know who I am, but it's obvious.
Quit seeing through me. Right?
Because I was like, oh my God, I'm so good at looking perfect from the outside. I had such a great glamour. I was wearing this energetic mask I was wearing that said that I was perfect to everyone around me, right? I lived for my image of perfection and got it all togetherness. And she just crumbled it in a second. And I was just like, it's still a traumatic moment in my memory. It's just like, I'm like, I don't know.
It's those moments, pivotal, though. Right? Yeah, it's those moments that shake us and go, oh, we have some work to do. I love that you said I was wearing the perfect mask. We do that.
I didn't even realize how strong my mask was until I cut my hair. So my hair had been mid-back and I cut it to just below my ears twice in a year and a half, and nobody noticed. Mm. Nobody noticed. I just like, nobody even noticed I had cut my hair at all. And I looked at them and I was like, I cut my hair. Did you not notice that? And they would literally stare at me and like twist their head sideways a little bit and crunch their eyes up. And they went, oh yeah, I guess you did, didn't you? And I was like, that was what made me realize that I had an energetic that was a shield that was so strong that people literally did not see me.
Yeah. And that's one of our greatest human desires is to be seen, right? Yes. To be seen, to be heard, to be felt, to be experienced. Let's move into the third step of this healing, because I think that as we move past into that, then we can kind of gear back into that growth.
Yeah. Well, the third step is the step that a lot of people try to skip to.
Yes. Right.
They try to
zero to this. Yes.
They're like, no, we're fine. I'm just going to go do this, because we love to skip steps. We overachievers, we love to skip steps. And so many people will try and skip to what is known as shadow work. Mm-hmm. And shadow work is the process of digging out the buttons and the triggers and things that send you flying, right? Trying to unwind your stories and your beliefs and things like that. The problem is that if you try and skip to this step without doing the first two, you don't have the bandwidth to do the work, because your brain's going, and you don't have a solid enough container to hold the energy.
Right.
And so one of two things will happen if you skip the steps ahead of it. One, if you have good self-preservation skills, nothing will happen. You will get nowhere. Okay. If you have bad self-preservation skills, which most of us do, then you will re-traumatize yourself.
Right. We tank.
Right. And then you'll go, this doesn't work. And it's what causes a lot of people to quit. So I would highly encourage you not to skip the first two steps so that you can be successful in the third one. Because once you've got your fears under control, you've got your monkey mind and your inner critic silenced, and you're ready to go. And now you've got your energy solidified. So you're not leaking energy all over the place. You can hold a solid container for yourself. You know who you are. You know who you're going to be coming back to when you finish doing each piece of the work. Then now you can hold what you need to hold to do the work of looking at those limiting beliefs, looking at those parts of yourself that you think are too ugly to be acceptable, looking at the things that you've assumed about life and starting to question them, right? All of those things are now available to you within the context of the shadow work. And you will be successful in doing them if you have the courage that you have spent the time doing the other two pieces of work building to be able to do the work. Because a lot of the work that we do in those first two stages is courage building. We have to, because we've spent so much time under assault by our own minds in the beginning, we feel very weak internally. We may be very strong externally, and other people may perceive us as very strong people, but we feel like we are on the verge of breaking down at any given moment all the time. And that creates an inner belief structure that we are not terribly strong. Even if we say, I am not a victim, if we go into our warrior, which is what I did, go figure that's where Sparta came from. It's the last name I picked when I got divorced from my first husband. I love it. I was very in my warrior at the time, right? But it's still, it is a rebellion against the inner feeling of, oh my God, I could break down at any moment, right? And so when we've had all of that experience, we need time to build our courage and our belief in our own courage, because we actually have a ton of courage, or else we wouldn't still be standing.
Exactly.
Right? We are incredibly strong, or else we would not still be moving through. Right. But we need our time to build our belief in our courage to deal with the emotional sides that we have been packing away and shoving down and stuffing for decades.
Right.
And so the process of going through the first two steps gives you the time to unpack some of that emotional stuff and process through it, so that you can build your belief in your ability to do that, so that when the time comes to do the processing on the deeper work, you have a belief in yourself and you've built enough courage that you are willing to face the stuff that shows up in the shadow work.
Yeah. We can't skip the spiritual work. We just can't. We can't skip. We can't skip from point A to point F in hopes that it's going to stick. It's not going to stick. Just like you said, we're either going to get in it and nothing happens and we're like, this doesn't work, or we're going to tank and then we're still trying to figure it out and float while we're worse than when we started.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, right? Yeah. And so then we're like, now where are we? Well, my life's a mess. Nothing's going to work. This is the way it is. And we do get stuck. That was air quotes.
My mother did. Yeah. My mother studied for 20 years and she never got any better. She finally gave up and then she died. So I was still formulating all of the structures and concepts by the time she passed. If she had hung out for another 10 years, I probably could have gotten her there. But it's not my job to heal my mom. Right.
That's such an important moment. Let's witness that and have that conversation for just a moment, because that is one thing that we humans feel, that when we have experiences with other people and we begin to do our work, then we think, oh, I'm going to hand this over to this other person that was involved in it. And let's see if we can heal them too. And then we can meet and create this new relationship. It's never our job.
No.
Nor does it ever work.
Well, so it can work, but only if they already wanted it to.
Right. But generally it doesn't happen.
Generally it doesn't work. And in fact, it's so important that that's the case that I actually have instructions in my first program to not go out and proselytize about the program in the beginning, because that's where you're at, is you're trying to fix everyone around you, which is actually you trying to manipulate them and control them so that you can feel safer.
Right.
And that is not a healthy place to come at it from. You're much better off to do your work and be a model. And then if they're interested, they will come to you and say, hey, I've noticed a big change in you. What are you doing? Right. But until they ask that question, keep your mouth shut, because I learned this one the hard way, because I could see where everyone could be. Right. I have to tell you, at the time I thought, oh, I'm so insightful. But actually what that is saying you're not good enough where you are. Right. And so it's actually a judgment. I could see I could see your potential. It's like, that's kind of a judgment, right?
Yeah.
But I had this ability, that was the shadow side of the work that I do today, which is, I can see where the challenge points are, right? And so, but if you present someone with their challenge point before they are ready to see it, you actually inoculate them against ever hearing it in the future when they are ready.
Big wall, a big wall that goes up immediately. How dare you judge me? How dare you put what you think about me in between us? Definitely. It's one of those things that I'll often ask the women that I work with, what are we strengthening? And are we strengthening the judgment, the fear, the constructs, the pain, the past, or are we going to strengthen these pieces of leaning in, taking the emotions, getting them broken down, understanding the lessons, and then moving forward. What are we strengthening?
Yeah.
Really what you're just talking about.
Well, and with identities, it's so important. It's such an important question because, and this is one of the things that I talk to people about a lot, especially women, because the women are so often survivors of sexual abuse or physical abuse or whatever. And I tell them, I say, look, I recognize that survivor is an important step in your healing. But you need to get the hell out of survivor as soon as humanly possible. Because when you define yourself as a survivor, you are telling the universe to send you more things to survive, to reinforce your self-definition.
Yeah. And it happens every day, all day long. And then we say, why is my life always like this? Because that's what you're strengthening.
Yeah. What you take pride in is what the universe will give you. And if you take pride in your ability to overcome horrible circumstances, then you will get more horrible circumstances to overcome.
Right. Exactly. A beautiful definition of really taking ownership of our lives in a way that works for us and not against us.
Yeah.
So as we are really leaning in, we are understanding our identity. We're really getting into a place where we have the ability to own our energy, understand who we are, and then we get into the shadow work, disrupting these pieces that don't work for us, extracting what does. How do we move into growth by your standards, by your transformation?
Well, so growth is the process of doing the shadow work, right? That is the process. We go through multiple stages of the growth as we go. Those stages are, I actually laid them all out in the book that I'm just coming through writing. I'll give you the beginning stages because those are the ones that are relevant to the people who are just getting started on the journey, and you'll recognize them in yourself, right? So the first stage it's stage 0, I would say, is there's got to be more to life than this. Right.
Yeah.
That's the inherent thing. It's like, I'm existing. I'm not living. There's got to be more. Right. And that begins the stage 1, which is the discovery stage. It's you go out searching on the internet, you watch a bunch of videos, you take a bunch of online courses, you read a bunch of books, blah, 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 blah. And eventually you figure out the path that feels like it's the one that might be helpful to you.
Right.
And assuming that it's the spiritual path, then you will step into what I call the proof and proselytizing stage, which is, holy crap, this stuff really works. I must tell everyone I know so that they will, and I'll drag them out to classes with me so that they don't think I'm crazy.
Join me. It's great.
Join me. It's great. Come over to the dark side. We have cookies, right? It's that. Oh my, right? It's just everywhere you go, you're doing a 2-hour class here, a 2-hour class there, 15 different videos, whatever, right? And you're dragging in whoever you can get to come along with you because, you don't want to be alone on your journey.
Right.
Now, there's actually a second reason for this. And this is the first time I'm talking about this. So I'm just like, I want to say this. There's actually a second reason that we do this. And it's because inherently we understand that when we step into a process of growth, we will leave behind anyone who does not choose to grow with us.
Right.
And so when we're in this early stage, we're yanking in the people that we care about the most in the hopes that they will say yes to taking the journey with us so that we don't have to ultimately leave them behind.
Right.
Because you will outgrow your friends who do not choose to grow with you. And your friends who do not choose to grow with you will try and talk you out of growing because they're uncomfortable with the idea that you are growing, and their internal discomfort will cause them to try and pull you back to where they are because they don't want to come to where you are because they too value the relationship. And so, this is one of the hard truths about growing is that you will outgrow your friends over and over and over again. And that is just the nature of the beast. I have been through so many different friend groups over the years, and there's always a fallow period in between when one group of friends goes and another group of friends arrives. That's always the nature of the beast. Be prepared. It doesn't mean that you're a pariah. It just means that you're in that fallow place in between where you're waiting for the new group to arrive. They will arrive. Be patient. But that's the other reason why we drag them out with us, is because we value them and we want them to come on the journey with us.
Yeah. I will often say that growth is sort of messy and lonely. And that we have to allow that process to unfold, even at the risk of doing it alone. And that is so hard for people to understand and to allow. If I just hold on a little bit here, but I also do a little bit over here, it doesn't work. The lines don't, blend very well. Sometimes, somebody sees it, like you said, and you've demonstrated how well you're doing and how great you feel. And there's, give me some of that, please. Give me a side. Yes, I'll take it.
Right.
Most often.
But it's rare.
Yes. Yeah. It's most often not happening that way.
Yeah. And, there is a point, and this came up for me probably, 5 or 6 years into my hardcore growth process. I hit a point where I recognized, because I was single at the time, I had divorced my husband. I recognized that if I continued growing, I was likely going to outgrow most potential partners. Because women take this journey far more often than men do.
Right.
So I was like, I had to make a decision, because I could recognize that it was holding me back. I could recognize that I was resisting growing more because I was already having a hard time finding someone to date who could even remotely keep up. And I had to make a decision for myself that my growth was more important than being in a relationship. And that was a really difficult decision to make, but one that I don't regret now, because I now have a new husband who can more than keep up. But I'm not going to lie, it took me another 10 years.
Right.
And we admit that we were not ready for each other 6 months before we met. I often say that, when you step out in faith, which is one of the later stages, that the universe will give you an instruction that will make you say, you want me to do what?
I've had that moment. Actually, I've had like 50 of those moments.
Right.
I hear you.
Exactly. You see what I'm saying? Yes. So stage 2 is the proof and proselytizing stage. And then stage 3 is the prove it stage. Okay. And it's the stage at which you have studied enough that you are having a sense that this stuff works and you might actually be able to do it yourself. And you are now trying to prove to yourself that you are able to step into the power that it takes to be able to wield this sort of energy. This stage is the stage where a lot of extroverts will go out and teach. With introverts, they will tend to teach their friends, right, one at a time, or they will become solo practitioners. I'm going to do my practice. I'm going to prove to myself it works, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a point where they hit stage 4. And the key to going from stage 3 to stage 4 is to admitting that there is no magic pill, okay? To admit that you are your own magic pill and that you hold the solution to your own problems.
Right.
The answer is not outside of you, but inside of you. And when you can make that transition, you will enter stage 4, which is retreat for self-study.
Oh, yes. Self-study is one of the best things we can do, which then must lead us into stage 5,
which is surrender.
Such a hard thing for so many people to do.
Yes.
It takes some conscious effort and thought and willingness.
Yes. Yeah. It's terrifying.
It is.
Right. And it's about learning how to trust the universe. Right. And then stage 6 is about stepping back into your power and stepping back into your choice and learning how to balance that with the surrender. There are 11 stages. And basically when you hit 11, you come back to 5 and you start over again and you just keep circling through them. So
we're never really done.
No. So my favorite book of all times is Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which most people know. The book is a book within a book. There is a Messiah's handbook inside of the book. And within that is a quote that I absolutely love. It says, "If you want to know whether or not your work on the planet is done, here's a simple test. If you're still here, you're not done.
Amen.
Right?
Pretty self-explanatory.
Right? I love
it. Yeah. We never fully arrive until we've arrived at the end, and the end is the last breath. And so, absolutely beautiful way to talk about healing, to share your experience and the ability to do this work. It's not easy work, but it is valuable work that takes you from this place of everything's fine, I'm okay, this life isn't really what I want, but it is what it is. A saying I absolutely cannot stand.
So perhaps it's forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better yesterday. That's Carol Burnett. And that's a better or less trite. It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
Or it was what it was, which is really usually more of the problem, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because all of the stress and suffering and all that stuff is in the past. The only time that we can really do those things is in the now. And so if you're creating your own suffering by really continuing to cycle in those places, we need to get to step one of healing and find out who we really are.
And it never ends. I mean, we keep doing it. Everything is like layers of an onion. I mean, if you think about your big issues as like pins that you've stuck through the onion, so that every layer, there's a little more, a deeper version of that issue. And then there are other issues that are just on that particular layer of the onion. And so, so I'm doing the next layer of work that I started 15 years ago. But I'm still doing it today. It's showing up in other places in my life, and I'm doing the next layer down. It took me 2 years of looking at this particular issue that's showing up over and over again, which is oddly not getting what I want. I was like, oh, I'm being loyal to mom. Okay, I can let that go. Right. But there's habits in there. And I'm like, I noticed one, this is what I'm saying is that it's a consciousness, right? We have to pay attention to what we're doing. And no matter how evolved you get, and I am super evolved from where I was 20 years ago, I look back and I go, wow, I don't even recognize that person anymore. And yet here I am, still doing my work, still dealing with my stuff. And it's okay. That's the process. One thing I will say though, and I do want to say this because people freak out when you talk about shadow work. They're like, oh my God, that's so scary. I can't, right? Let me just tell you this. The very first step you take to allowing yourself to be more vulnerable is actually the hardest step you will ever take in your spiritual growth process. Everything gets easier from there. And so no matter how hard you think it sounds to do all this other stuff, by the time you are getting to the point where you're ready to do it, it is so much easier than that first step ever was. No matter how hard it is, nothing is harder than that.
Right. Permission. Yeah. So necessary. Yeah. And things scare the hell out of us all the time, right? Every single day we have issue, we have problems, we get freaked out. Okay, so take that same energy and do something that works for you. So important. I always end every podcast with 3 things. It could be 3 things that you want to have as the big takeaway, 3 things that are really massive and moving in your own life, or 3 things that really can help somebody level up and empower themselves. So I'll leave it to you as to what your 3 things shall be. Big ask, I know.
Yeah, 3 things. So you are enough, no matter what you're telling yourself, no matter how you feel, you are enough. Happiness is your birthright. You are entitled to it. And in fact, it is meant to be. And you are loved even if you are pretending that you're not. All the love that you've ever refused to receive in your life because you felt unworthy of it, none of it went away. Go inside, close your eyes, and open to receive it, and your life will change.
Beautiful. 3. Thank you for your time, for your beautiful energy, for your teaching. As you were speaking, you said the spiritual curriculum. I think the spiritual curriculum to growth and healing has definitely been what we received today. So I can't thank you enough.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
What Kelly said is so true. The only time we arrive and the work is fully finished is when our lives are fully done. There's always work to do. There's always another way to grow. And definitely, there's always more to discover and uncover. If you want to learn more about Kelle and her programs, visit her website at www.kellesparta.com. There you will find more about her programs, her podcast, and her new book, Nailing Your Spiritual Growth in Record Time. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to turn on notifications to be alerted each week when a new episode of the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast is released. If you're looking for daily inspiration, join us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Get Your Life Together Girl, or visit getyourlifetogethergirl.com for additional videos, blogs, and upcoming events. Thank you for listening and being a valuable part of this community. Please don't forget to leave a review as it helps us spread this message to others who may need it. Also, if you want to gain more insight into your emotions, click on the link in the show notes to download the new You're Only as Strong as Your Weakest Emotion ebook and journal. It's a downloadable journal that will guide you into greater emotional understanding and intelligence. It's 50% off for our podcast listeners. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.